than what we were aware of a while back. The purpose of the webinar today is to actually help understand how do you manage these sophisticated malpractices. What is the work that is going on, either as a product or an organization perspective as an industry, to actually help build some sanity into this? We at MMA have tied up with whiteops and TAG, which is Trustworthy Accountability Group, and bringing together this discussion around the impact of what the sophisticated bots and are having on budgets, and what's the kind of downfall of advertising that we see right now. The big numbers behind all of this, and the panel today will actually discuss some of that while giving you some background on the possible solutions and the taxonomy around fraud, but also post that is a discussion around how one can manage this fraud. So before we get to that, I do want to take a couple of minutes talking about what MMA is and what do we do. MMA is an industry body. We are 800 member strong industry body across the world. And our premise is to actually help the marketeers understand what mobile marketing is. Cultivating inspiration, which is really aimed at chief marketer, guiding best practices and driving innovation, supporting and developing ideas on mobile strategy and the potential of mobile platform. The second pillar that we work on is building capability, which is really building and fostering confidence in the chief marketeers on helping demonstrate what the nuts and bolts of the organization should be and how they should be moving. As in any other industry, measurement and impact is of immense importance, and we've scientifically and irrefutably been able to provide some of that through our research on smocks and attribution as to how beneficial advertising is when it's integrated with mobile across other mediums. And last but not the least is the advocacy, which every industry does, and we also work with other industry bodies to do it. From our membership perspective, there's a lot of learnings and empowerment that we provide to our members and to individuals across, whether it's networking or accessing information, helping shape the future by providing the right exposure for the industry and providing tools and services from an assessment perspective or otherwise. And it makes us unique because what we are trying to do is to really project what the future of marketing will be. I'm not walking you guys through this slide, but this slide basically gives you a very good overview of how our scientific best practices are helping shape the future for advertising and marketing as we know that's going to evolve in the next 3 to 5 years. The times that we live in, obviously everybody is aware of COVID, and we've also put together a marketer support hub, which primarily pulls down all the marketing campaigns, etc., that are happening, and some of the best practices that are required in today's world to actually manage the situation we are in. We've also recently launched a mobile certification program, marketing certification program. The first batch of that was executed on the 17th and 19th, which is last week. The next batch is going to be on the 21st and 23rd of July. And this is our endeavor to pivot online and provide online education and certification to the industry as we deal with COVID. The other program that we've launched with is the Ideathon program, which is basically an hackathon to help the marketeers with some of the business challenges or marketing challenges that they have. So if any one of you are interested to participate, please do let us know. This is open till the 4th of July, and the hackathon is going to happen on the 11th and 13th of August. Last but not the least, and this is really important, and this is a build up to the webinar today, MMA has actually launched an attribution fraud assessment tool last week. You can actually go online and launch this tool. It takes less than 10 minutes to understand what is the readiness of your organization's fraud and ability to fight fraud. And I think this is really important from an attribution perspective as we move forward. So we all encourage you to look at it. Obviously, what you'll hear today between TAG and whiteops is going to be even more engaging. So do send us your questions if you have any. So that was about MMA. What I also wanted to talk about is give you a glimpse of our upcoming webinars. They are here. We started the webinar series immediately after COVID took place in April 2020. We've been very active. We've done close to about 40 webinars in the last 70 working days. And this is our way of providing the industry and bringing them together to actually help get the discussion going. There are a couple of others that have been lined up, as you can see. I personally run there's no playbook for this, which is a leadership discussion across Asia and Europe with some business leaders talking about what are the opportunities, how do we pivot from COVID and going forward. Many programs that you can engage with, they are all available on the MMA Global website. So please do log in and reach out to us. And you can scan this QR code and subscribe to all our social media handles. Would highly encourage you to do that, because that's where you first get to know what's happening on the industry, in the industry, by the industry. So really encourage you to take a QR scan of this, and it automatically logs you into, gives you an option to log into all of these programs. With that, just to make sure that we have a very interactive and engaging session today, there is a Q&A tool on your control panel. Please use that. Please make sure that you give in your name, your company name, along with the question, so that the panelists and the moderator can help channelize the question to the right person and have a context of where you're coming from, so that the answer that is being provided to you makes true sense to you. Now, it gives me an immense pleasure to introduce the panel and your moderator. I am your host, Rohit Darbal. I'm the Managing Director of Mobile Marketing Association. And I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Sanchit Sanga. He's a digital business consultant and a strategic advisor for Coro, and is a leader in the digital business in Asia Pacific. Along with him, we have Joe Nguyen, who's the APAC advisor for Trustworthy Accountability Group, TAG, and they are all members and partners of MMA in the region. And so I'll thank both of them to take this opportunity to participate in this session. Dimitris, Head of Detection for whiteops, and we'll talk about some of those taxonomy and other areas of what people can learn, and also some possible solutions. And last but not the least is Jahid Ahmed, who's the Head of Digital and Content for Marketing for HDFC Bank. Banking, if there's any industry which is very key from a fraud perspective and is at the cutting edge of detection and everything, is banking. So we have Jahid here, who's going to help run the panel along with the other panelists to discuss and share with you what are the opportunities going forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sanchit to take you guys through to the balance of the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. And kudos to MMA APAC for the series you guys have been running. Trust me, there is information and there is education, and it's a great opportunity for people to learn and get together for the benefit of the entire industry. So keep it going, mate. Super stuff. We have pretty accomplished panelists. All of them are experts in their own space, with the exception of me. So we'll hand over to Dimitris, who's sitting in sunny London, I hear, and he'll be walking you through whiteops, and then Joe can chip in with some pearls of wisdom from TAG, and then we'll get into the panel. Before we do that, it might be interesting to get a sense of the size and scale of fraud that we are dealing with. Of course, fraud has many facets to it, and there is no one dimension. I think Demetrius will touch on that later, and we can cover it in the panel as well. But the question is, what's the size of ad fraud currently that exists? Just to give you a glimpse of the numbers, and it multiplies at a pretty dramatic rate. In 2017, the size of fraud was $8 billion. So this is our audience poll. Please go ahead and click on numbers that you believe are currently what is detected ad fraud.
So we'll give audience couple of seconds to poll. In the meantime,
Sure.
Dimitris, if you can load up your slides, and then we can get started. And I'll share the results the moment the numbers are in.
Sounds good. Let me present my screen.
Sanchit, we have the numbers on the screen. So if you would
Awesome. So most of you have got it right. Two numbers floating around in the market. The size of ad fraud is somewhere between 25 to 40 billion. We consider it 40 billion as the number. So a few of you got it right, which is impressive. Now, just to give you context in terms of what this scale looks at, the total advertising industry is 335 billion. So we are looking at almost 15 to 18% of all advertising which is surfacing in the online and the mobile world has some element of fraud detected. So it's a pretty sizable number to look at. So let's focus on this and let's learn more from Dimitris and Joe and Jahid later on. Over to you, Dimitris.
Thank you, Sanchit. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much, MMA, for hosting us. It's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the challenge, because we don't often realize what's the problem here. And what we've been observing at whiteops is that the sophistication of ad fraud has significantly changed over the past few years. It used to be the case that ad fraud adversaries were operating their operations out of simple data centers using very basic techniques. They were not looking like humans at all. And now we are seeing a new sort of frontier in the level of sophistication. We've moved from actors who were just making some extra money to corporations that are really kind of driving these efforts in what we think is organized crime in the cyberspace. And when you have to deal with such a problem, you can't really use cookie cutter solutions. You really need to focus on the problem of ad fraud. And that's what we're doing at whiteops. The mission of the company is to protect the internet from automation and unauthorized transactions. And on top of that, what we've realized is that this is an economics problem, and we want to change the economics, because the more expensive we make it for bad guys to make money through ad fraud, the less attractive it is for them to be in this space. So we want to reach that point where it's so expensive for them that they just find another place to abuse. I'd like to quickly talk about the TAG Invalid Traffic taxonomy. We very often talk about ad fraud and invalid traffic, but we don't really know kind of the breadth of different things and different types of ad fraud that you can find in the wild. And the TAG Invalid taxonomy is helping us put a little bit of structure on how to think about ad fraud. That taxonomy is talking about two main categories of invalid traffic, what we call general invalid traffic. And these are kind of basic techniques that each company should be applying. There is no real sophistication, and it includes three categories, what you'll see here as data center, known crawlers, and irregular patterns. These are mainly things that you can acquire from TAG. There is a data center IP list, and IAB provides what they call the spiders and bots list that you can apply in your transactions. But what is interesting is the next category of invalid traffic, which is the sophisticated invalid traffic, and it comes into a few different flavors. The first thing that you'll see on this list is what we call automated browsing. The classic example here is an army of infected devices that create a botnet that is generating traffic as if it's looking organic. Then you'll see false representation. We've seen a lot of domain spoofing, app spoofing in the past, emulators claiming to be real devices, generating all sorts of different fake transactions. The third category is what we call misleading user interface, where you have all sorts of like ads stacked within the creative, like multiple ads stacked within creative, or ad hiding and click jacking are cases where we'll see that type of ad fraud. The next category is manipulated behavior. I think this region suffers a lot from attribution fraud and fake in-app installation fraud, and that would fall under this category where the user is either and kind of pushed to install an application, or there is a completely fake attribution event happening in the background. And the last category is incentivized behavior. We've seen an increase in platforms to actually commit manual ad fraud, either view videos or click on affiliate links and all sorts of different things that would be part of what we call manual sort of generated fraud. So that should give you a little bit of context on the breadth and the different categories. It's sometimes very useful to start using this language when we talk about ad fraud. Now I'd like to walk you through a few cases that we've observed at whiteops and what we've done to mitigate them, but also kind of bring more long-term consequences in our industry. And the first example I wanted to talk about is a pretty large botnet operation that we named Eve, that was generating, let me go to the next slide, generating more than 3 billion unique ad requests on an every single day. At any point in time, these guys had more than close to 2 million infected machines around the world, and they were spoofing thousands of different domains. So as a marketeer, you were expecting, you were buying inventory to show up on a premium website, and instead what you were buying is this spoofed page that a botnet was visiting. So there was no real inventory. Everything was pretty much fake. And although in the beginning that operation was pretty small, what we saw over time was that it was growing a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, they were generating north of 3 billion ad requests on a single day. And that's where we realized that we had to approach this problem in a different way. And we brought together an industry collaboration group to more aggressively take down this operation. And the result of that effort is what you'll see here. We took down this botnet. We worked with Google, we worked with the FBI, and what was the result of that operation was not only that we took down the operation, but we were also able to bring consequences to this problem. 8 people were indicted, a number of people were arrested in what we think was one of the first cases of bringing consequences into ad fraud and people going behind bars, which is, it's important. It's important for us to increase the risk for adversaries to commit fraud. It's not just about, turning them off and they'll move to something else. It's also about increasing the overall risk. And that's where you see kind of the industry coming together. At whiteops, we believe in collective protection. We've built this ecosystem of partners we're working with some of the biggest ad tech platforms and brands in the world to secure the ecosystem that marketeers are transacting. At this point, I think yesterday, whiteops processed north of 1 trillion ad transactions in a single day. That's 1,000 billion ad transactions, which gives us an amazing visibility in the entire ad ecosystem and the opportunity to build detection that can benefit everyone in the industry. And that's what we call collective protection. Another example I wanted to present is a mobile kind of an in-app ad operation that we recently took down. A number of malicious applications on the Google Play Store that had millions of different downloads. That what they were doing, if we would go back to the taxonomy, it would fall under misleading user interface. The victims here were both the marketeers, but also the actual users who installed the applications. You would install this application, it will hide its icon from your mobile phone. You wouldn't be able to uninstall it, and it would start showing ads as you were just using the app. So you were on the phone, and all of a sudden you would get something like this pop-up on the left. So very, very distracting experience, and marketeers didn't really know that they were showing up in these type of ads, which definitely are impacting the reputation of their brand. We worked with Google, and we took down these apps. Sorry, let me fix my screen sharing. Let's talk a little bit about our observation when it comes to marketing fraud. We often don't realize that we need to work with an expert to really go deep and understand our marketing spend and where we actually buy human versus non-human traffic. In a study we did recently, it was jaw-dropping. Like, we worked with a number of different brands just as a case study to see how much invalid traffic we're going to find. And it was super surprising to see these numbers. And a number of brands were buying north of 40% of sophisticated invalid traffic. And the interesting part is that it was coming from many, many different places, including kind of retargeting campaigns where the bad actors were feeding, were doing what we call cookie sweetening, and were adding themselves in the retargeting list. So what we've observed is that when it comes to marketing, ad fraud is something that you can find in many different places. It's all over based on what we've been observing. You might be running lead generation campaigns, display advertising, video advertising, performance campaigns on CPC or cost per installation. And this is not only impacting your ROIs, it's also impacting everything that you have in your tech stack, from your kind of data list that you produce, from your CRM systems. It can have downstream impact in your marketing automation systems. And we think it's very important to work with partners like whiteops to make sure that your ad spend is secured. That's all I had. Back to you, Sanchit.
Thanks, Dimitris. We'll hand over to Joe to talk about TAG and the initiatives TAG is taking along with the industry. Joe is a known name, a big industry speaker and futurist. So all yours, buddy.
Thanks, Sanchit. Can you all hear me okay? I hope so.
Yes.
And thank you, Rohit and MMA, for inviting me here and whiteops for pulling me in. I wanted to show a recent study that TAG did in Asia Pacific, and we did this in conjunction with 614 Group. First, I want to talk about TAG. As you've heard a little bit about TAG from Demetrius just now. So we're a global advertising industry organization, it's a nonprofit with the aim to fight criminal activity in the digital supply chain. So that's eliminating ad fraud, combating malware, fighting ad-supported piracy, and promoting brand safety through transparency. If you sort of understand where whiteops comes in, they are the guys that will actually roll their sleeves up, have data scientists, have white hat hackers, if you will, that go in and try to fight and combat and hopefully prosecute these essentially white collar criminals. Whereas TAG is an industry organization. We want to work with the industry to reduce or eliminate this fraudulent activity. So to that end, we have a program about first companies within the ecosystem, and I'll go into that a little bit, can register, that can be certified against piracy, against malware, against fraud, and also even their inventory for publishers can for SSPs, for example, can also be certified for quality guidelines. So TAG's membership is across the board. As we said, we're part of the ecosystem. So this is, you can see that the publishers on there, but obviously we start with advertisers, P&Gs, the Unilevers, Colgate, and then you see the agencies, right? Everyone from Group M, Publicis, and a number of others, Dentsu, coming in, and then you get the DSPs, the Trade Desk, AppNexus, which is now Xandr, and then all the way over to the SSPs, Open Access, Index Exchange, PubMatic, and then to the publishers themselves, whether it's Verizon, ESPN, Walt Disney, Ziff Davis, and those guys. So the membership and the leadership council of TAG is across the whole ecosystem of advertising, from advertisers all the way to the publisher. So what does that mean? How does that work? So what we will show you in a little bit, and what we mean is, okay, if a agency is TAG certified, that means they're following standards and best practices. You saw a little bit earlier what Demetrius put out about for example, the data center blacklist. We have a malware blacklist. We have standards that our publishers and all on the ecosystem will use ads.txt, ads.txt, all those things, so that if they use that, then the agency understands that if they're buying from the demand side, that also looks at tag certification, has the block list, has all this stuff, and the sell side also has certification. They're not taking inventory from nefarious or potentially nefarious sources, that it is tag certified. So if everyone in the ecosystem runs on a tag certified chain, then the IVT, this is the invalid traffic, this is both sophisticated and general IVT, will be reduced by 83%. And this is compared to the general ad fraud rates that we've seen. And this is what our studies have shown. And this is the next, I will show what we found in APAC. So this was a study that we did for Asia Pacific, India, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, and Southeast Asia. The data was from Q4 2019. It looks at desktop, mobile web, mobile in-app, and obviously display and video. And the number of impressions examined were 3.2 billion, supplied by Publicis and OMG. We also did a qualitative survey analysis with Publicis, OMG, and MediaCorp. And that's the basic report parameters. So what we found is that in these channels of the 3.2 billion, if they're using the tag certified channels, the ad fraud rate was 0.82%. This is in comparison to the global ad fraud rate of 9.2%. So there's a massive reduction of 91% if they're actually using those tag certified channels. And this is across those markets I mentioned. How does that compare to the rest of the world or other parts of the world? This is the first study that TAG has done in APAC. And these other data that you see here are from USA and Europe that TAG has been tracking for a while. So when in the US, the tag certified channels are about 1.48, 1.6, 1.4% of ad fraud that's being reduced from the 9.2%. Europe is 0.53 across the board in the last couple of years. So if I go back and we're at 0.82, right? So Asia is in between, right? In between the USA and Europe. We could potentially improve that, but we're going to break it down a little bit more in the next page. So of the 3.2 billion impressions, and you see the top line there, 0.82% as in the tag channel that are fraud. Desktop, right, at 295 million impressions is 5.3%. So desktop has greater amount of ad fraud that we've seen. Mobile web is 0.42, so that's in line with more Europe, and mobile in-app is even less. So if you see the numbers, and it all comes down to 0.82, and we see numbers because we know in Asia it is very much mobile driven in terms of the usage, consumption of media by users. So this all makes sense. But this is interesting results. It's a start. I think there's a lot of room to grow as TAG, whiteops, and other players in the region start to really tackle ad fraud as a whole. Last takeaway from me was based on talking to the various leaders in the region. So the first agreement is there's an urgent need for a widely accepted and independent benchmark. This is where TAG will come in. We are growing, we're starting to talk in the region with our global members that you've seen before, the advertisers, the agencies, DSPs, SSPs, and publishers, and getting more data so that we can provide an APAC benchmark so that the market can understand where they're at. The second part is there's a need for industry education, which is why we're doing this with MMA. There needs to be an understanding of what is GIVT, what is SIVT, what measures can be taken, and to understand more, and hopefully to get part of the ecosystem together so that we can work on this. And the market needs an easy way to identify diligent anti-IVT partners. And this is something that we, as TAG, are discussing with MMA and with other associations. How do we get the industry going? How do we help the industry with whitelists, blacklists, and all that to actually move the industry forward in tackling this and getting those, putting those guys behind bars, those criminals. So with that, thank you very much. I'm going to hand it back to Sanchit, and I think we're going to go to the panel.
Right. Thanks, Joe and Dimitris. Some very interesting and compelling data points to look at, and few takeaways that I personally got was one, fraud is not an advertising problem, it's a marketing problem. If you don't capture it upstream from advertising alone, it starts seeding in and decaying the entire marketing process. So you have bots sitting in your databases, you're remarketing to the bots, you're sending emails to the bots, you're sending alerts to the bots. So it is a marketing problem overall. So the size and scope of what needs to be mitigated upfront is a key factor. The second interesting thing I think Dimitri's touched on was the sophistication bit. Bots and fraud used to happen in servers. Now it's happening on your devices. And I think that is the change which is significant. We all need to watch out for as marketers, as an industry, and as users as well. Third key element, I think, which was very interesting was it being organized crime rather than beer money or whiskey money for Joe and me that that people used to deal with, and it's becoming a global problem. So that is a lot of good, interesting points and takeaways. I think it's a good segue into opening the panel. And gentlemen, I want to just say that there are no wrong answers, there are only wrong questions. So whatever your answer is right, whatever I ask might be wrong. So let's start with that. And I think it's interesting to go straight to the source of the budget, which is Jahid, and get a marketer's perspective. So first question to you, Jahid, because you own the budget, you control your marketing investments. Agencies don't. I know that some of them think they do, but they don't. You do. So the question to you is, what is the incidence of fraud you are detecting in your advertising and marketing programs as you roll them out? And there is a second leg to that question. How open are you to using third-party technologies which are experts in the space to deploy, detect, and mitigate it? Because traditionally and historically, India has been a bit reluctant to pay for third-party technologies. So what's your stance there?
Thanks, Sanchit, and thanks to the entire panel. I think very valuable insights that came across. And one thing, Sanchit, be it a beer money or whiskey money, a marketer is never happy to give you that kind of money, not at our cost. Okay, so yeah, I think Dimitris and Joe rightly highlighted it. If you see a marketer, and from an Indian point of view, from the India market, the digital industry is around what, a 2.5 billion kind of a marketing industry at this point of time, the digital marketing spends that's happening. And I was going through some reports, shocking and astonishing. Out of 2.5, around 1.6 billion is going only in frauds. Now, from a marketer parlance, what are these frauds? Okay. Now, see, a marketer has to ask three very valid questions. Have my audience really seen my ad? That's the first question that we should add, And if they have seen, then who has seen my ad? Okay. Third is, where are they seeing my ad? And these three questions will always lead to three biggest cues, which is viewability, ad fraud, and brand safety. And if you club these three are taking 63% of your ad budget, which is not actually giving you a culminating to any profitable or lucrative traffic. And you will eventually come to know about this in the ways that we always get to analyze and then realize, So I think viewability is a significant aspect that we have to really take care of, apart from the whole thing that we know with Dimitris took us with a very sophisticated ad fraud that's happening. And if you see, there are two main type of invalid traffic: GIVT and SIVT, general invalid traffic and sophisticated invalid traffic. I think the awareness has reached to a level where we marketeers can handle to an extent a general invalid traffic. But what Dimitris was rightly highlighting is a sophisticated invalid traffic. People have moved from cookies. They have actually started going into a device. And I love the example where they showed in that Shopify ad structure, where you don't know that it's a device. It has a device ID. It's actually adding elements to your cart, but the payment is not happening. Okay, how do I take care of all these things? It's a nightmare for us as to how do I justify each and money spent, especially if it's a performance-led campaign, or if it's a campaign which I'm only doing to raise consideration and awareness. There is no performance linked to it. Okay. So these are the 2-3 things that we always take care of as to what to do and what not to do. And we have always seen that there are 3-4 things, if you really see for the wider audience also.
how are the ads getting served? There is ad stacking. There is pixel stuffing that's happening. Okay, there is domain spoofing that's happening. So the ads are getting served, but my audience is never being able to see it. Okay, we have realized lot many cases that the click to the visit to my page is as low as only 40%. Then where is that 60% traffic going? If I've clicked, people might say that page download is not happening on time, or the internet speed is not happening. But will that lead to a 60% loss of traffic? As simple as that. Okay. Uh, and forget about the whole device idea. When we are doing app-led campaigns, when we are doing, let's say, more of in-app transactions-led campaigns. Okay, how do we help each other to understand that a bot traffic is not coming in and doing the traction for us, which is actually just ending up the first ending up our marketing budget, but not helping us with the very valuable traffic. So these are the things that we take care of, that we have to understand. And sophisticated the invalid traffic has to be very, very strictly dealt, not only with the help of the tool, but with the analytics, collaboration with analytics, the tools, and human intervention to understand the IP or the device-led anomalies that's happening. And we have to be very strict and mindful of that fact.
Great points, Jayed. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you.
Sorry, can I jump in real quick?
The number. 1 second, Joe. Let me just get one number out from Jahid, because he made some really interesting points. So viewability is a quality measure. It's a media quality measure. And yes, it forms part of the overall integrity piece, agreed. Fraud, specifically, if you had to look at incidents of fraud, is there a number you're picking up? And second thing, what's your flexibility and availability in using third-party tools currently? Are you implementing some, and what is it that they're picking up? Joe, we'll come back to you.
So Sanchit, it's okay. Let me put it this way. How we do it. When it's a performance-led campaign, the control is more in our hand, right? We obviously, the way we have learned and how we have turned our deals are like, if it's a performance-led campaign, I will not pay money to the publishers or to the affiliates that I'm working with. Okay, if the performance is not happening, after happening, when we use tools, like we have made it mandatory to go live with a campaign with ad fraud tools. And it will not cost you more than 2 to 5% of your overall marketing budget, but that 2 to 5% of that budget will help you save around 25% of your marketing budget. That's the correlation that we can always draw. Okay. So that's a mandatory option for us. So after our performance-led campaigns, we always do an analysis. What's bot-led, what's proper traffic, and then we only pay to affiliates, which is which has kind of properly contributed to my performance. We either blacklist the others, or if we see that no, there has been a good historical performance, maybe it's a one-time aberration, we always try to talk to the publisher and then give them one more chance. That's for my performance-led. Okay. But when it comes to more of visibility-led campaigns, where it's more to do with it's more to do with awareness, consideration. There is no performance leg to it. The performance is only traffic coming to it, and it's later a BLS survey, right? It's a CPM deal or a CPC deal, right? My cost is already incurred before the tool can also realize. So it's always a post-facto analysis that we do. But yeah, before we set up the campaigns, there are a lot of sophisticated tools within the DCM or the DSP parameters where the viewability results are properly seen when we try to set up bid metrics. And that's where my agency comes into very handy, where we tell them to properly monitor and then set up campaigns.
Excellent. Joe, you were mentioning something.
Yeah. When I first heard Jayed's number, so 63%. I mean, that is a scary number, right? And that's. But I wanted to step back and you're saying you the other part of 37% is reaching your audience. 67. I mean, what you're saying, we have to differentiate wastage from ad fraud, right? If your campaign is reaching 37% of the target audience that you want, that's actually pretty damn good. Sanjit, would you say so? Of course, when you pay by performance, that's a whole different, commercial.
Joe, I think you should allow me to live in that myth that at least 37% is good for me. Don't burst that cloud for me, please. Okay. But yeah, in that 67%, Joe, that I was trying to mention, is actually a combination of ad fraud as well as wastage. That was as for me. But in case you said it's higher, maybe we can always touch base with you and I understand, and that will be a bad news to hear. Certainly, yes, yeah.
Awesome. Question for Dimitris.
And I wanted to add something on the
Sure.
previous question.
Go for it.
I think it's very important for marketeers to be very mindful of what they use as a performance measurement, because the reality is, as sophistication is going up, you'll see bots that start, filling up forms or, doing all sorts of different interactions to make the marketeers otherwise look good, or viewability. I mean, viewability spoofing and high CTR bots are, we know it is happening all the time. So if you're optimizing a campaign on viewability or click-through rate, or you have a very naive way of measuring your ROI, you have to be very, very cautious, because you can actually end up with the opposite problem of attracting fraudulent traffic.
Awesome. And again, Dimitris, it's pinching me, this one statement you made in your presentation around the scale at which you're picking up fraud. And the question that kept coming to my mind was the process you guys follow for detection of fraud and mitigation of fraud and identification of fraud, because these numbers are staggering, and you've done some brilliant global work. Is it serendipity? Is it accidental identification? Is it a conscious effort? Can you walk us through the process you guys follow, which might be slightly different from how other companies do it, to identify the scale and these sophisticated bots that emerge?
I hope it's not serendipity. We've been working on our detection framework for a long time. And our approach is, I would like to think of our approach as a multi-layered approach. It starts with what we call a technical evidence-based approach, where when we execute our tag or payload on a page through our JavaScript or via our native SDK, we collect thousands of different data points that we then use to do kind of internal analysis. This is a team internally at whiteops of security researchers that are literally trying to hack the hackers. In a sense, they're trying to find these indications of compromise that then become a very strong signal down the pipeline. The next layer is what we call machine learning. We do a lot of statistical modeling and have, like I mentioned earlier, we are seeing 1 trillion ad interactions a day. There is a lot of information that you can extract from those interactions alone. And we build a number of different reputation models for the devices we've observed, or reputation models on the different IPs that we've been observing. On a daily basis, we are seeing on a daily basis north of 500 million unique devices. On a weekly basis, we've pretty much seen the entire internet, or a very big portion of the internet. So we build a lot of knowledge by tracking these devices over time. And the last piece, which I think is extremely important, is adaptation. Bad guys, when you demonetize their operation, they'll do something else. They'll move to something else, and we build an engine that is designed to follow them to the next move. The fourth piece of the fourth layer of our detection engine is our threat intelligence team. We have a team of threat research experts who will go externally in the wild and look for indicators that are useful for our detection engine. They'll try to map the world of residential proxy networks, or try to hunt new types of malware that they're seeing in the wild, and bring that information back to whiteops to help us improve the detection engine. Sometimes that team will go all the way to doing what we call attribution, which is like even finding the individuals who are behind an operation, find the techniques, the practices they use and their methodology, so that we get that intelligence back to our organization.
Fascinating. Joe, question for you. And since you've been fairly instrumental with industry bodies, different kinds, and leading change and suggesting change in the industry, where does the buck stop? What should the ecosystem partners be doing together to get universal adoption of elements like tag? Who's responsible? What should the industry bodies be doing? What is your advice for everyone on this session?
Well, we were talking about, first is education, the recognition that we need to do it, right? I mean, in the industry here, we've been talking BAV for the last, I don't know how many years. I think when I was at Comscore, we first spoke about viewability, right? And within BAV, that which is brand safety, ad fraud, and viewability, right? Those are different components and different players, different solution providers in that. And that education's been going on. Ad fraud has been the less looked at of the three in this region and up until now. I think the first one was viewability. When it first came out, it was like, oh, I don't want to pay for that. It was a commercial thing. And then brand safety, obviously, when someone screen captures something and everyone yells and screams. But then ad fraud is sort of under there, and no one sort of hasn't been brought up until fairly recently and now. So what does that mean? That means there are frameworks. There are frameworks by tag. There are frameworks that if everyone follows, it would be it would eliminate or at least reduce it by large amount. And while TAG, for example, has partnered, has the membership and the leadership council by the agencies, large agencies, all this stuff, it is still driven, it needs to be driven by the executives and media planners and everything on the ground in the countries, in the region, right? And also by advertisers, right? Who said, I want this, I need this, right? What are you doing about it, right? So it is, at first, it's the awareness, it's the education, and then the willingness to do it. And for tag, it's just a matter, it's a certification. It's understanding this is what I need to do. Is the ecosystem, are you people who you're buying from doing the right thing? And if you ask those questions and you push it through, it'll naturally happen. Unless you're going on full blown and you engage whiteops and you engage other things to actually really pull it down, because it's very important to you as an advertiser, that's additional cost. But from a get the ecosystem together, it's not a huge investment monetarily. It's an investment in resources and understanding and all the whole ecosystem to actually commit to doing it.
Fascinating. It's an interesting point you raise around the marketing community and their agency reps coming together to mandate implementation of some of these measures. I think that will mitigate a lot of stuff. We have a few minutes to go. There are some questions coming up on chat before I move into them, which are specifically for some people and some of the panelists. Dimitris, talk a little bit about your marketing integrity product. There is a lot of excitement in the market around that, because most products address advertising integrity as generalists or specialists, but you guys are taking a leap of faith forward, which is creating a lot of interest in the market. Walk us through what it does and how does it work?
So we've worked a lot with big tech platforms, ad tech platforms, like, for example, the Trade Desk is using whiteops by default, like it's part of the value proposition. And what we realized at some point is that marketeers are spending, their spend is coming from many different sources, including the walled gardens and social media spend, and they don't have a good way of tracking the quality of the inventory they're purchasing. And at the same time, we have all these knowledge from all these transactions that we are seeing that we can, leverage to bring marketeers in our collective ecosystem, collective protection ecosystem, and that is the offering. We want to protect all the different sources of spend for marketeers. Is it coming from social media? Is it coming from programmatic or CPC search traffic, affiliate traffic, and educate our clients on where they should be optimizing and where they're buying more fraudulent traffic from to eventually increase the ROI of their campaigns.
Awesome. So own channels, sources of traffic can be identified, and you can feed that back into the media and advertising piece. Great stuff. Guys, before I ask specific questions which are coming up on chat, just wanted the audience to know that Dimitri is wearing a beautiful t-shirt which says human, and Joe is wearing a hat which says human. Anyone who wants these free goodies, please write to Rohit with your email address or his team, and we will get these across. I know that this was not planned.
We are
humans. You guys can send them across.
And Sanchit is actually a bot. I don't know if you know that, but Sanchit is actually a bot.
Exactly. Yeah, and a profitable one to that. So, okay, question for Joe. No, there's a question for anyone who wants to address it. I think Dimitri's would be best suited. How to detect fake installs, and where does all the fake traffic come from? This is from an anonymous attendee.
That's a very good question, and there are multiple threat models here. Like when we start thinking of a problem, we start from the fundamentals, from the different threat models that could lead to a fake installation. And we've seen many different threat models for fake installs. One of the typical ones is injecting a click before an actual installation is happening. Sometimes you will hear that as click flooding. So you have like an infect machine that is creating, millions, thousands or millions of different clicks for different applications. And they, when an installation is happening, they are essentially stealing the attribution of something that could have been organic otherwise. Like they're just injecting that click before the installation happens. And we've seen sophisticated actors doing that. They can see that the user is trying to install an application, and they'll just add that click in the stream, which will lead to them essentially stealing the attribution. We've also seen other cases of fake installation where malware will go all the way into installing the app on your phone without even knowing. So there are a few different threat models here. Where is it coming from? It really depends. It could be malware on the device. It could be data center traffic that is doing the click flooding. So there are a number of different sources where you can see. It could be proxies where you can see this traffic coming from.
It's a brilliant thread to the next question, which again, I can throw it open to everyone, but you can start with Jahid here. The question is fraud a responsibility of the marketeer or the technology? And the second leg to that question is, what's the role of the consumer? I think the question is supposed to be, is fraud detection a responsibility, not doing fraud, but that's the question. Whose responsibility is to detect fraud, mitigate fraud? Is it the marketer or the tech? And what's the role the consumer plays in it? Again, from an anonymous attendee.
Yeah, no, I think the responsibility is across, like from the multiple channels that we have. Okay, can they come together as a united body and help us to avoid fraud and media wastage? No, that's very important. Can we relook into the definitions of viewability that has been set up, like let's say years back? Okay, we cannot still go ahead maybe with MRCs, the definitions that have been set. So everybody should have their own viewability definitions, and that can only happen when all the publishers come together and define the viewability. And that's why maybe digital is still in a native stage as compared to a TV, because there it's more properly defined. And third is from a bot point of view, understanding a bot traffic. There, the role is of technology, of analytics, of marketeers coming together, huddling in and understanding each of these things, how it's happening. And obviously with the product guys also, because if you don't understand that, a lot of people, a lot of bots might just kind of, escape your naked eye, even the tool possibly. Okay, so what is the lifetime value coming from these affiliates? If you don't understand that and plug in the whole report to back to your campaign, you'll always live in a dark spot. So I think it's the responsibility of all the key stakeholders who's otherwise standing to benefit from the campaign. All of these guys should come and huddle and ensure that this is happening. And technology has to get at the forefront, riding it.
Guys, in the interest of
Hey,
time,
Sanchit.
one sentence answers from Joe and Dimitris on the same subject before we close and summarize.
Okay.
Whose
so
responsibility is it?
I agree with Jahid. However, as I've said this before, this ad industry is driven by advertisers who hold the money that filters down to everybody else. So the person or the group who needs to be the advertisers. I want this. If you want my money, you do this. And if everyone else will follow.
Brilliant. Dimitris, one sentence again, please.
I think it's collective. We are an industry that each stakeholder should have their own responsibility. Publishers are responsible, advertisers are responsible. We need to all be educated. There is lack of education. So I think it's a collective responsibility.
Fantastic. I'll just summarize with some key thoughts and discussion points which were picked up. Sophistication, scale, collective responsibility are the themes that have come out. Thank you everyone for attending. And thank you very much the panel for these supremely insightful comments. And back to you, Rohit.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure having you guys here. We hope you will join us for our next webinars as they move forward. There were a fair amount of learnings. I think Sanchit has summarized them pretty well in his towards the end. So I don't really need to say anything other than the fact that thank you for joining. Thank you to the panelists for actually enabling this discussion and joining us, Jahid, Joe, Dimitris, and Sanchit. See you later. Stay safe.
Thanks,
stay
Rohit.
if
Thank you.
possible.
Thank you, Rohit.
Bye. Bye.